Good morning, everyone. Just a quorum check. I'm just going to ask Councillor Crisanti, we see you online. Could you turn your camera on? I think we're ready to go. Good morning once again. My name is Stephen Holliday, Councillor. I'm the Chair of the Audit Committee. We have quorum. I'm now calling meeting number 7 to order. Welcome, everyone. Today's meeting is being held by video conference and in person at City Hall in Committee Room number 1. This meeting is also being live streamed online at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. Although we may be meeting in different locations today, the Audit Committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. If you're registered to speak at today's meeting, please listen for me to call your name. I will call speakers in the order that they appear on the list. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Audit Committee meeting at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. Members, the City Clerk has provided all agenda materials on toronto.ca/council and on the CMP, the Clerk's meeting portal. Clerk's IT staff are available to members if you need help with your devices. I also want to remind you to please submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at Audit Committee, audittte@toronto.ca to help with motions. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do have an interest, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and indicate the item number and the nature of your interest. Seeing none, we'll proceed. May I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our meeting on October 15th, 2024? Moved by Vice Chair Myers. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. We have 9 items on our agenda. Let's review the agenda starting with item AU 7.1. That is the Auditor General's Office 2025 Work Plan and Budget Highlights. I will hold that for a presentation from the Auditor General. AU 7.2 is the Audit of Software Acquisition and License Management, Managing and Optimizing Value from Software Licenses. I will hold that because there is a presentation from the Auditor General and from City staff. Just the Auditor General. Pardon me, just from the Auditor General. AU 7.3 is Cybersecurity Audit of Toronto Community Housing and Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation's Phase 2 User Access Management and Event Logging. Are there any members wishing to hold this item to ask questions? Councillor Fletcher is going to hold the item, AU 7.3. Pardon me, Councillor Crisanti?
No, Councillor Fletcher held it. That's good. Thank you.
All good. Okay, thank you. AU 7.4 is status update on the Information Technology Disaster Recovery Program. Are there any questions of staff? Would a member of the committee like to move the item? Councillor Nunziata moves AU 7.4, which is the status update on the Information Technology Disaster Recovery Program. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that item carries. AU 7.5 is the Audit of Parks Branch Operations Phase 1, December 2024 status update. Are there any questions of staff? Would a member like to move the item?
I will move the item, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Crisanti moves the item. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. AU 7.6 is status update on enterprise risk management. Are there any questions of staff? Councillor Myers, you want to hold the item? Okay, so we'll hold that item. AU 7.6. AU 7.7 is the KPMG management letter for the City of Toronto with management responses for period ending December 31st, 2023. Are there any questions of staff? May I have a member move the item? Oh, I move to receive. It's moved to receive the item. Okay, I'll move to receive the item. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. AU 7.8 is update on action plans KPMG management letter recommendations. Are there any questions of staff? Would a member like to move the item? Councillor Nunziata moves the item. That's receipt for information, and I'll thank you to staff for their work and their preparation on this. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Our final item is AU 7.9, which is the business improvement areas update on 2023 audited financial statements. Councillor Fletcher is holding AU 7.9. And Mr. Clerk, just confirming that is our last item of business. Okay, so we are back up to the top of the list, AU 7.1, which is the Auditor General's Office 2025 Work Plan and Budget Highlights. We'll just take a moment for everyone to get in position to deliver a presentation. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready to begin when you are, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So this presentation is on my office's 2025 work plan. I'd like to acknowledge and thank my team, which includes Ariane Chan, Assistant Auditor General, sitting beside me, Ina Chan, Deputy Auditor General, Matthew Crisafulli, Senior Audit Manager, as well as the rest of our executive team and all of our staff who contributed their ideas and suggestions. Next slide. During this presentation, I will discuss how our audits are selected and audit coverage provided by our past reports. I will then walk through our 2025 work plan, including key areas of audit focus for this year, with projects in progress or starting in 2025, projects on the horizon for 2026, as well as other significant work for my office. My report also includes highlights of my 2025 budget request. I am providing this to the Audit Committee for information only as you consider my office's 2025 work plan. My 2025 budget request will go directly to the Budget Committee for consideration in January 2025. For 2025, I am requesting a budget of $8.651 million. My office's budget represents approximately 0.05% of the city's 2024 operating budget and remains among the lowest of major municipalities across Canada, as well as those of a number of municipalities in the United States. It also reflects the way we are now at full staff complement of 44 FTEs, and if approved, I feel that my 2025 budget request is sufficient to cover the work outlined in my 2025 work plan. Just to note that if councillors either request through a motion that I consider an additional audit or vote with 2/3 majority resolution to add an audit to my plan, I would need to delay an audit currently on my plan in order to do that additional work. Next slide. So before we get into my 2025 work plan, I think it's important to keep in mind how we select audits to be included. Our office conducts a citywide risk and opportunities assessment every 5 years and updates it annually for changes in emerging risks, priorities, and trends and allegations made to our fraud and waste hotline. The risk factors used are outlined in Appendix 2 of the report and include financial significance, cybersecurity and IT, public interest, and adequacy of controls. Starting in 2025, we will begin a new citywide risk and opportunities assessment, and dedicated audit resources will be required to complete it. The results of this assessment will be considered when setting the audit priorities for the next 5 years. In determining the selection of our audits, we also consider input from city management and councillors, including councillor motions, and we use the knowledge we've developed through our previous audits and follow-up work. We aim to have audit coverage across the various city divisions, agencies, and corporations. Next slide. So this slide shows the coverage we've achieved over the past 5 years with our reports. You can see that we've had breadth in our coverage and also more in-depth coverage in certain areas, including technology services, transportation services, Toronto Building, Toronto Transit Commission, Toronto Community Housing Corporation, and Toronto Police Service. you can find a listing of our past reports issued from 2020 to 2024 in Appendix 3 of our report. For 2025, we plan to continue our focus on key areas such as 1, housing and community, 2, cybersecurity and IT, 3, infrastructure, transit, and environment, and 4, procurement, contracts, and potential savings. It's important to note that the 2025 work plan is intended to be flexible to allow myself as Auditor General to respond to emerging issues, including the need to assign resources to investigations into high-risk allegations when needed. This slide outlines our 2025 work plan, and the blue font shows those projects that are in progress or will be started by the end of 2024, and a few of these are in the reporting phase and will be reported in February 2025. The remaining projects on this slide shown in black font are those that we plan to start in 2025. Just to note that we've included a third cybersecurity audit in 2025 of a selected agency or corporation, and this is contingent on our 2025 budget request being approved. In addition, if the Auditor General's 2025 budget request is approved, the Auditor General will also engage professional services for expert specialists and/or contracted forensic investigators to address the requests made by City Council at its meeting on November 13th for the Auditor General to conduct a further forensic investigation of the procurement of the Pay-It platform. Our work plan also includes a 2026 project horizon. These are projects that may start in either late 2025 or early 2026, depending on priorities and available resources. So this slide shows all the projects we have planned for both our 2025 work plan and horizon by our 4 key areas of focus. And again, those shown in blue font are those that are in progress or recently started in 2024, and the red asterisk indicates those that are restricted entities where I need to be and have been invited in by the board to be able to do the work. So for the first theme of housing and community, this continues to be a priority for the city. At the February 2025 Audit Committee, we will be presenting our audit reports on Parks Maintenance and Repairs Phase 2 and winter respite sites and warming centers for people experiencing homelessness. We will soon start an audit on capital planning and delivery at the Toronto Community Housing Corporation and Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation, and we'll start the audit of supportive housing in 2025. On our audit horizon, we have affordable rental housing, city planning development applications, and Toronto Police Service on special events and paid duty. For the second theme, we're going to continue our focus on cybersecurity and IT. For cybersecurity, we will conduct a full-scale cybersecurity follow-up from our previous audit of the Toronto Police Service, as well as a cybersecurity assessment of Toronto Public Library and 1 other selected agency or corporation. On the horizon for cybersecurity, we will conduct a cybersecurity assessment of the Toronto Zoo and 1 other selected agency or corporation, as well as a citywide audit of cybersecurity risk of third-party shared services. For IT, in 2025, we will audit Toronto Police Services, IT governance and infrastructure, and on the horizon, we have a citywide audit of hardware asset utilization and data centers management. For the third theme, infrastructure, transit, and environment, we'll be presenting our audit report on TTC's non-union workforce planning and management at the TTC's February 2025 Audit and Risk Management Committee and board meetings. Our audit of transportation services utility cuts is currently in progress. And during 2025, we will start our audits of Toronto Water stormwater asset management and a major capital project of corporate real estate management, as well as solid waste management services, contract management of collections and litter operations. On the horizon, we have audits of road maintenance, electric ferries, TTC electric buses, and TTC subway maintenance. Lastly, we will continue to focus on the area of procurement, contracts, and potential savings. Our audit of low dollar value purchases, P-card usage, and payments is currently in progress, and we have also started our audit of the FIFA World Cup 2026 contract. In 2025, we will conduct a citywide audit of purchase order amendments and an audit of the administrative penalty system for parking ticket fines. On the horizon, we have a citywide audit on the use of consultants. We also have an extensive backlog of 79 potential audit projects that we would like to be able to complete over the longer term, and you can find this backlog listing in Exhibit 1 of our report. In addition to our audits, we have other significant areas of work, and this includes our recommendation follow-up. We have a significant number of outstanding recommendations, and management have self-assessed about 38%, so that's 233 out of the 614, as fully implemented. Our follow-up process includes verifying those recommendations that management has self-assessed as fully implemented, focusing on those that are high priority. High priority recommendations either have cost savings attached to them, are considered higher risk in terms of safety and other risk factors, or have been outstanding longer than 5 years. There has been an increased emphasis from this City Audit Committee, as well as audit committees of certain agencies, to ensure the recommendations greater than 5 years old, particularly those greater than 10 years old, are addressed and closed quickly, which our office appreciates. Given the turnover of staff at the city and our office since the time of those reports, we are finding it is taking additional time on these ones, but they all still appear to be very relevant, and we are working together with staff with support from internal audit teams at the city and its agencies, and we will verify these once fully implemented. For this next follow-up cycle, we plan to focus on Toronto Community Housing Corporation and the following divisions in particular: Technology Services, Transportation Services, Toronto Shelter and Support Services, Toronto Water, Fleet Services, and Facilities Management. For our fraud and waste hotline that we operate, we continue to receive a high volume of complaints. As of October 31st of this year, we had 592 complaints representing more than 900 allegations. Based on this volume, the hotline could receive approximately 710 complaints by year end. This volume has decreased approximately 37% since last year, which has allowed our staff time to address the significant backlog we have. During the past few years, we were receiving a high volume of complaints that were not in the hotline's jurisdiction, that is not related to the City of Toronto. So in 2024, we made updates to our website to more clearly outline the types of complaints that do fall within the scope of our hotline. And as of October 31st, the 37% decrease in complaints is primarily attributed to a reduction in allegations that are outside of the hotline's jurisdiction, as well as a decrease in subsidy and service-related complaints. Our forensic unit also conducts investigations into high-risk allegations and follows up on those referred to divisions for investigation. Conducting investigations into high-risk allegations can require a significant number of staff resources, time, and in some cases, costs associated with hiring external specialists. So to recap, the audits selected for my office's 2025 work plan keep pace with risks and emerging issues, consider input received, including any City Council motions to date, and provide coverage across the city and its agencies and corporations, with the goal to continue to assist City Council in holding management accountable to achieve value for money in city operations, and to help the city to make a positive difference in the lives of Torontonians and add value to the city, including continued cost savings. Thanks for your time. I'd also like to say thank you to all the councillors, management and staff, and members of the public who have taken the time to provide their ideas and suggestions for my work plan. I value your contributions and feedback very much, and please continue to stay engaged and to keep those ideas coming. And now I turn it back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. Are there questions of the Auditor? Councillor Nunziata?
I too, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we'll get you next. Thank you, Councillor Grisanti.
Okay, thank you. So in the last page where you mentioned 614 outstanding recommendations, and so what is the reason for that? Is that staff have not implemented the recommendations from the reports? Or maybe you can explain that.
So through the chair, there is always a certain number of recommendations that are going to be outstanding because it does take some time to implement them, and then there's recommendations added every year from our reports. However, as I mentioned, there are a significant number that are outstanding greater than 5 years old. And so in those cases, there's various reasons for that occurring. Sometimes it may relate to things that take a longer time to implement, such as an IT system, or there might be other challenges in terms of them being citywide changes that need to occur. And so the city manager's office and internal audit are working together with management on addressing those. And my understanding is that the city manager has placed priority on making sure those are addressed.
Okay, so for 2024, do you have a list of recommendations that have been implemented and actually the cost savings in those recommendations?
So through the chair, we're going to be reporting out on our cost savings in our annual report, which goes to the February 2025 Audit Committee.
Okay, and that's included in your budget? When you bring forward your budget, what is the increase of your budget again? What's the percentage?
Yeah. So through the chair, so 1 second. Last year.
Yeah, you mentioned an amount, but what is the percentage?
So last year, our approved adjusted 2024 budget was 8.291 million, and this year it's 8.651 million.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Through the chair, it's 4.3%.
4.3%. Yeah, that's what I wanted. Thank you.
Councillor Crisanti, please go ahead.
Yes, good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, once again, I want to commend the Auditor General for, first of all, an excellent presentation, quite ambitious as always, and your office continues to do good things. And again, an investment in your office, I've always said, is a great return on investment for the city, for the taxpayers. However, it seems that you still have quite a bit of work ahead of you. I just want to address initially a point you just made earlier about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard was that there are about approximately 79 projects currently on backlog, and a number of them on the horizon. The ones on the horizon include all of the ones on backlog. Can you just speak to that for a moment, please?
Sorry, through the chair, the audio was a bit choppy there. Can you just repeat that last bit?
Yeah, did you catch that, Councillor? Just the audio was just, it's weak. Just towards the end of your question, you were mentioning about audits on backlog, but what was your question?
Yeah, so my question to the Auditor General is that she mentioned that there are approximately 79 projects currently on backlog, and a number of them on the horizon. Do the items and files that you have on the horizon included in the 79 projects on backlog? And is this typical? Do you normally have this many projects that in process?
So through the chair, yes, so we currently have 79 projects on our backlog listing. That is separate from the projects we have on the horizon. The ones on the horizon, we expect to start in late 2025 or early 2026, depending on the available resources. And this is a typical amount that we aim to achieve. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. And you also mentioned that you're also looking at the, and one of the files you're working on is the use of consultants. I think for years we've been talking about the use of consultants, and you're still working. Is that a file that you're almost near the end of making some recommendations? Because that's something I think we have to look at very, very closely. We have great skills, people with skills in the City of Toronto. And again, we need to focus on using our own people versus using outside consultants. And I understand that there are times you have to. So where is that? Where are you at with that?
So through the chair, that project is listed on our horizon, so we have not begun that audit yet. So that would be late 2025 or early 2026 that we would start that audit.
All right. Additionally, one of the areas you're looking at is the TTC in terms of TTC employee retention, reviewing procurement for the TTC, assessing effectiveness and efficiency with respect to preventative and corrective maintenance on subway systems. Again, this is something we've been looking at for years, and to this day, I still get calls in my office complaining about the lack of maintenance and cleanliness on the subway system. Have we not addressed this before? Are there now recommendations already out there to deal with this issue?
So through the chair,
Through your
yeah, that audit is on our horizon, the subway maintenance audit. My understanding is that TTC has just recently engaged consultants looking at that area, so that is the reason for the timing there. In terms of past reports, we've done one on TTC streetcar overhead assets in terms of repairs and maintenance, which could still have implications even though it's a different transit method. But I don't think,
Okay,
China, was there anything else on
sorry to
subway? I don't think
interject,
so, yeah.
No? Okay. So again, I'm hearing that the TTC is engaging consultants to deal with the maintenance issue. I'm a bit surprised. We need consultants to talk about keeping our system clean and tidy and organized and safe. We got people internally that could deal with that. Or is that precisely what you're going to be looking into?
Through the chair, it's hard to say at this point. We haven't started the audit yet, so we'll need to determine in our planning what we scope in.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're doing it. Okay, because that's this. Again, we're using consultants, I think, for the wrong reasons in this area. So please look into that. Look for your report. Okay, and finally, this is something that's that I've been addressing for many years, and I remember at one point in time that we had somewhere in the vicinity of $70 million at the TTC for fare evasion. That's now gone up, from what I understand, to about 140 million, and it continues to climb. Will your audit also look at fare evasion, or would you look at fare evasion and audit that area to see how we could, improve processes to deal with that issue?
So through the chair, we performed an audit on TTC fare evasion back in 2019. There are still a number of recommendations that are outstanding that management is working to address, and the Audit and Risk Management Committee and Board are on top of making sure that management is held accountable for those, and our follow-up work will have a look at those once management has assessed those as fully implemented.
Well, you just mentioned there are a number of recommendations that are outstanding. How many? Do you know off the top of your head? And can we get an update as to where that we stand with those recommendations?
Last question.
At the end of initiating all those recommendations to the BTC, do you expect that fare evasion will improve dramatically? Oh, well, get better, not more?
Through the chair, sorry, I missed that last part about.
Just your audio, Councillor.
Yeah, I know I'm over time, Mr. Chair. I know that you're saying that they haven't implemented all the recommendations. That's quite concerning. This is since 2019. So why is that? Are we following up? Can we get an update on that?
So through the chair, I have been in contact with management and with discussion with the Audit Committee chair, and so they are making progress. However, there are some that are still not fully implemented. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it is something that the Audit and Risk Management Committee and the board are definitely keeping a close tabs on in terms of holding management accountable. And I will go in there soon to do follow-up work.
Okay, great. I mean, if you could just undertake to give us an update on that, that would be very much appreciated. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you and good morning. I'm just wondering because after we did our pay it, you did your pay it audit. City Council asked you to follow up and determine how the score sheet had been changed to reflect only 100 points rather than broken down. And I'm wondering, is that part of your 2025 work plan? How are you planning to deal with that, Madam Auditor?
So through the chair, as I mentioned, we've included a budget enhancement request, a one-time enhancement request to address that item. So if my budget is approved, then we would be conducting that work.
And that would mean you would use your court-appointed kind of powers to dig your forensic powers. Is that right?
Through the chair, I would use the powers as Auditor General, which are through the City of Toronto Act 2006.
Yes, and with that, I'm not of the same mind that of Councillor Crisanti, because sometimes you do need somebody from outside or a more forensic view. So thank you for that. On this list, I'd just like to go over it. So Toronto Police Services, it's just the IT and the IT infrastructure that exists that you're looking at for Toronto Police 2025?
Through the chair, so for 2025 for Toronto
Could you
Police
move
Service.
that a little closer to?
So for 2025 for Toronto Police Service, we have the IT governance and infrastructure, as well as a full-scale cybersecurity follow-up. And then on the horizon, we have special events and paid duty.
Okay, so
And also, once they've fully implemented our previous two reports, we will do follow-up work on those.
I see, so they're not implemented. So we would hear, one of your plans is to basically say, here's what's outstanding from all of the audits that we've had before, because people are hoping that you forget and move on to the next one. In the past, the auditor's been very involved, not necessarily in my past here, in looking into certain things and giving advice. Is that still one of the roles that you can play in your office? I'm just going to talk about Toronto Police and the 54 division new headquarters that was started in 2016 and has been abandoned and involves all kinds of city staff as far as the site and everything else. And so I'm just wondering how that could have a quick look. Is that something you still do?
So through the chair, in terms of advisory work, that's not something that's within my mandate. We do performance audits and reviews and investigations. We do audits of Toronto Police Service, and we did do we did a risk assessment and got a work plan approved through the Toronto Police Services Board. And so I'm choosing audits that are on that work plan that's been approved by the board. Just a reminder that I need to be invited in by the board to do that work.
It's not just the board, it also involves Create and CREM, not simply the police. So does that have a different approach, if that's the case?
So through the chair, if you have a suggestion, I could consider that.
Okay, in the past, the auditors helped. Let's say there was a situation in Greektown years ago, and the auditor at the time, I think, arranged for a review and then best practice report. Apparently, that's not something that the Auditor General's office does anymore,
So,
without coming directly to a committee, but as a service.
so through the chair, no, that's not something that I would do. We do consider best practices and benchmarking in our audit reports.
But is that something you can still do?
Through the chair, my understanding is that advisory services are not something that's
Okay,
within
so
my
that
mandate.
wasn't, shouldn't have been done. All right, thank you. For utility cuts, can you tell me just the scope that you're thinking about for utility cuts, please?
Can you answer that one?
I'm going to take a minute or two here. Yep. Yep.
So at this time, through the chair, the utility cuts audit, we're still in the audit planning stage. So we're still trying to do some background research before we decide on the audit scope.
So will you come with the audit scope to the committee?
No, because usually we wait until we finish the audit, and then we'll, through this audit committee, will issue the report.
Okay, just one of those ones that's very public and part of everybody's everyday life, dealing with utility cuts. So I'll speak about that when I speak. Not to tell you what to do, but your scope of work should include everybody's experience with roads,
Yes,
in my
so-
opinion.
Through the chair, we'd be happy to receive any suggestions that you might have.
I think we should do that more formally, in a way, Auditor General. So I'll speak about that, and you can decide how you'd like to handle that.
Councillor Fletcher, did you want to go to a second round?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so we'll give everyone else a turn, then we'll come back. Councillor Myers.
You, through you, Chair. Just quickly, I just want to hoping the Auditor General can address some of the questions and concerns Councillor Crisanti had about fare evasion. Can you confirm that the TTC has been actually making significant impact and headway in stopping fare evasion based on your recommendations?
So through the chair, I know that management has been making progress and taking action, but we have not yet done the follow-up work on the remaining recommendations, so I can't comment on whether they've been fully implemented or not.
Thank you. Part of your recommendations was to have plainclothes officers, correct?
Through the chair, that was one of the considerations.
Yep. And another consideration was closing the crash gates.
Yes, correct.
And another consideration was phasing out tokens and tickets.
Through the chair, yes, correct.
Correct. Okay. Well, I'm just happy to report those are all underway right now. So just wanted to get that out of the way. Regarding the TTC non-union workforce planning, can you please just explain a bit more about what that entails?
So through the chair, it is in the draft report stage, so it will be coming forward to the February TTC Audit and Risk Management Committee and board meetings. It is looking at the planning and management of the non-union workforce and includes succession planning and employee engagement, among other things.
Thank you. And just out of curiosity, why did you decide to audit this?
So through the chair, as part of our citywide risk and opportunities assessment, we did, the area of workforce planning and management did come to the top. At first, it did include the union as well as non-union. And we decided in terms of timing with union negotiations, we didn't want to influence them. And so we started off with the non-union.
And is this a type of audit you've done before on TTC?
Through the chair, we haven't done this particular type of audit before.
And just for my clarification, you wouldn't do an audit unless there was something to audit.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
So there might be something there that we need to prepare for at TTC.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, so I'll run my timer. My question actually is to the city manager's office. We talked a little bit today about the accumulation of audit recommendations that are not closed. Could you offer the committee a very brief overview of what the city public service is doing to keep an eye on those things? And in particular, high-risk items and items that have been open for longer than 5 years.
Through the chair, I'll respond on behalf of the city manager's office. So Finance and Treasury Services has been working with the city manager. Specifically, internal audit is playing an enhanced role, working with our programs and agencies and essentially a conduit through the Auditor General to both track where we are in terms of advancing open recommendations, as well as closing the gap that had been reported, I believe, last fall around some discrepancies in terms of when audit recommendations were deemed closed by divisions, but still remained open through the AG's reporting. So actions are being taken there to be able to provide an enhanced support, both in tracking and closing out that work.
So just to review the governance, the Auditor General prepares recommendations to the Audit Committee, then City Council adopts or not, but generally adopts those recommendations, and they become directives to the public service from City Council. So if I got it right, internally, the city manager's office and the management team generally is keeping track of all of the council directives. And over time, they are responding to them, but they don't have the right to close them out. Is that correct?
Through the chair, we will bring forward the actions to address the items identified in the recommendations, and then through our work with the Auditor General and her office, they'll be deemed closed, and the AG may be able to speak to that process better than I can.
And so if I can recap that in the simplest sense, Madam Auditor, the management will approach you from time to time, let you know that they have made progress and that they feel that an item is worthy to close, and then you'll go check.
Yes, so through you, Chair, management actually provides their updates in our software system that's available on a 24/7 basis. And then we go through that and see which ones have been assessed as fully implemented and focus on the high priority ones and determine what will be in that next follow-up cycle and then go and work together with them and verify them.
And so generally, and either management or Madam Auditor, you can answer this or both, but generally speaking, we have a systematic approach to the many recommendations that are open that is relatively new, so that nothing's been forgotten. Is that fair?
Through the chair, that's fair.
So things that may appear forgotten aren't, and it's part of the job of this committee is to keep an eye on that list and maybe ask questions from time to time if they're stale.
Through the chair, yes.
Okay. And one other question, there was a thought about providing advisory services within the public service on audit. You know, Madam Auditor, your mandate is slightly different because of the way the legislation is written. How does a division within the City of Toronto, who may be working on something, go and get audit advice? Is there a place to go, a center of excellence?
Maybe I'll start. So through the chair, we have our internal audit department. Stuart Campbell is here, the director, and they can provide advisory services to management.
And how far does the advisory services go? With respect to agencies, especially small ones, do they have that ability or do they have to go get their own?
Through the chair, certainly the larger agencies like TTC, police have their own internal audit function. That said, other agencies have periodically reached out to the internal audit division seeking advice on matters, issues, control design, or whatever the case may be. But just to add, certainly within the city itself, we do have on a regular basis, divisions do contact us directly and ask for us advice on some emerging issue or redesign of something or whatever the case may be. So yes, there is that ability through the chair, councillor, to reach out to internal audit for that advisory service and support.
And finally, Mr. Campbell, you're not waiting for people to come to you. You've got your own work that you're doing. And in addition to that, you're tracking your own list of stuff that comes out of the management letters. We had a report that was adopted today. So there's the big list of Auditor General's recommendations, and there's a second list of things that have come from the city's auditors, the external auditors, that you're also helping to keep track of, which are important to keep an eye on.
Yes.
Thank you. That's all my questions. We're going to go to a second round, as I think we've covered everyone. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. Back to the list. Thank you. So utility cuts, we've talked about that. I'm wondering under supportive housing, if you've had a look at the rapid rehousing and the rapid rehousing plan, in particular the impact on Toronto Community Housing and Toronto seniors, or if that's part of this.
So through the chair, the supportive housing audit hasn't been started yet. So during the planning, we would consider that.
Okay, thank you. And for a solid waste management contract manager of collections and litter operations, is that something that around the parks? Because years ago, parks now are doing all of the litter pickup, and solid waste does the litter pickup in parks. And I mean, parks has been the subject of your pen, and I get a lot of emails complaining about that, but actually isn't a parks function. Will you be looking at how that is? How the solid waste collection in parks is working out, both from just a collection standpoint, understanding the park standpoint, and I'll just call it fitting in a design concept with these huge barrels that are sitting in small parks, or is that something that's not part of that?
So through the chair, again, that audit has not yet started. So during the planning phase, that's one of the considerations that we would include.
And would you be looking at how those litter bins on the street, you know, the public ones, looking at the contamination rates there, and if those are actually something that have been effective, or you just feel good because you think you're recycling?
Again, through the chair, the audit hasn't started yet. So during the planning, that's when we determine our audit scope. And so we'll consider that as well as the park suggestion.
And the fact that nobody took any action on that one at the moment. We've just replaced them with, better looking ones, but I'm hoping that you'll look into that because it's been years and years, and I think has been a lot of contamination there. Just looking at the purchase order amendments, that's great. Administrative penalty system, parking ticket fines. Do you have any plan to look at the Toronto Parking Authority and their machines? Because that often, and also their new digital parking access, which may or may not work, and now you have parking fine issues that probably weren't there before when you just had a put whatever it is directly in that meter. So with the new systems, have you had a chance, or will you be having a chance to look at that aspect of parking fines, or are you just looking at the administrative side?
So through the chair, again, that audit has not started. So during the planning, we would determine the audit scope. So that is something that we could consider.
And what's the best way to suggest some of these things to you for your scope?
So through the chair, if it's suggestions for audits that we already have on our plan, you could just email me for me to consider them. If it's something that would involve adding an audit to my plan, then that would be a formal motion.
So these issues of scope here can either be done in a letter or when this gets to council, a motion, just to please look at these particular pieces when you're looking. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Are there any other questions in the second round? Seeing none, members.
Yes, there is one here.
Councillor Carsani, go ahead.
I did make a note in the chat indicating that I just had one final question. And Mr. Chair, I really don't want to belabor this point, but I'm going to on the fair evasion. I want to thank Councillor Myers, first of all, for that update. I think that's really encouraging that some of these additional recommendations are underway right now to help with the whole issue of fair evasion. $140 million, it's a lot of money for the taxpayers that could be reinvested in transit or other areas. But when the recommendations went out to the Auditor General, did we have at that time an implementation plan or timeline that we were following, and a tracking method for the implementations? 5 years is a long time.
So through the chair, there's always a management response to the report, which includes timelines. Obviously, it's taken longer than management initially intended. We did have the COVID-19 pandemic, so that impacted, there was no fair inspection during that time. And Councillor Myers might actually be able to answer this better than myself in terms of, I believe that there's going to be an implementation timeline now going forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just do one last check. Any other questions? Okay. Members wishing to speak? Anyone?
Well,
Councillor Fletcher.
I'll just thank the auditor for looking at all of these things. And I know getting the work plan together is quite a bit of work. And I think all good areas. I will actually be looking at making sure that some of the things that we are very aware of in your audits, such as the litter bins that people have been very frustrated with, the utility cuts that never get fixed and on all of my streets, the situation with parking tickets, which is the system has changed over the years, very frustrating for people when there's not when all the digital things aren't working together, because we've moved almost to completely digital, including unable to mail anything to parking and to the administrative penalties. Everything's online. And I think the digital divide is a really critical piece that needs to be in every single one of your audits, because many people, as we know, don't have access digitally. So when you get on there to do something and you can't fulfill it, it's very unfair. And without going to the ombudsman about it, but of course you could also do a joint investigation with the ombudsman, but I'm just flagging that. Also a few of the other things. So I just happy to hear you be so open to that, because in our offices, we get all of that. We're the other side of what's going on outside of the big frame. And I don't know when and where we're going to look at that terrible situation of the 54-55 having been amalgamated without a new office. And I'm not sure how that can be included, or if there's some other way to do that. I can't see behind me. Some people do think I have eyes in the back of my head, my children in particular, but I don't. So I do think that's a very big deal, and nobody's looking at it. And it shouldn't just be done by TPS, because it was the corporate real estate and Creatio that were very involved in that. And the other thing is just the rapid rehousing. When you're looking at that, it was a very noble effort. But if you don't put the supports behind it, when you're putting people into buildings, now you've created quite obviously, in certain circumstances, very difficult situations that are still ongoing. So just to round out your approach there, give you some feedback from the trenches, that's what's happening. Thank you again.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Any others wishing to speak? Councillor Myers?
A quick comment here.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Crisanti.
Oh, I thought you wanted Councillor Myers to go first.
It's okay, we got you. Go ahead, Councillor Crisanti.
Oh, that's great. Okay, thank you. So again, I just want to reiterate my thanks to the Auditor General and Auditor General's team for the phenomenal work that they continue to do year after year. But when we come up with recommendations and the recommendations seem to take longer than anticipated, I'm going to be looking a lot closer at the timelines. Quite concerned about the fare evasion, and I'm going to keep talking about that more and more. I remember 10 years ago we were in the 70 million range. We are now about double that, and it's terrifying now to think for that maybe this 140 million 10 years down the road, for whatever reason, it's going to turn into 200 million or more. We're making changes that are critical. We're now addressing recommendations that were put forward 5 years ago, and the pandemic was interrupted things for a while. However, I think timelines, whether it's the fare evasion issue or any other issue that the Auditor General is working on, the recommendations need to be adhered to, and we need to have a really good follow-up plan to ensure that recommendations are implemented in a timely and manner. At the end of the day, it's about having a good return on investment when it comes to our Auditor General's office. She's got a heavy workload, 79 projects backlog, and a whole bunch of them on the horizon. So I just want to thank her again and continue to look forward to continued success and savings and what we get from the Auditor General's office. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Crisanti. Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'll keep my comments brief. I'd just like to thank the Auditor General for her work on helping the TTC transform our business practices, get better, modernize, and keeping us accountable for taxpayers. Councillor Crisanti was right. We do have a big problem with fare evasion, and it's through the Auditor General's recommendations that we're actually taking proactive measures to cut down significantly on the amount. And I'm also proud to say that this is the first budget that we will be presenting where we're actually going to have a target for fare evasion reductions. And that is in no small part due to the hard work of the Auditor General in helping us get there. So thank you to you and your team.
Thank you, Councillor. Any others wishing to speak? Councillor Nunziata?
Just a minute, I also want to thank the auditor. So I see that the item that we have today for parks, that some of the recommendations that we brought forward have actually been implemented. So that's amazing on the report that you have on the agenda. So don't think they're here, but I mean, that's good news. It was done within weeks, right? Some of the recommendations were implemented. And yeah, as far as the fare and I've been bringing that up every year for years. and I don't think it had anything to do with the pandemic. I think there has to be some real changes at TTC. For example, I mean, this would be a board decision, is right now, because on streetcars and buses, all the doors are opened and people just walk in. So maybe we have to go back to the old way and only have one door open. And so this everyone pays their fare. That's something the board would have to decide on. But I think that's the only way we're going to resolve that issue, because that's why we have that problem. So thank you again, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. And I'll make a couple of brief comments. Thank you, Madam Auditor General, to you, but also to your team. We all acknowledge and know that there's a team behind you that puts together a lot of work to make this happen. I acknowledge that your plan is quite wide and ambitious, and I want to know how I can continue to support you on this. I know that you do this work, you talk about it in your other reports about bringing money back or having a return, but there's also the intangible and the things that continue to build and keep public confidence in the government and to avoid other costs and other losses that don't necessarily come in as a dollar value, but had they not been done, could have been very costly or disruptive to the city's government. So you mentioned just a little bit about your budget submission. In the past, this is where we would endorse that budget submission, and we don't have that opportunity under the new system. But I won't speak directly on behalf of the committee, but I think we support you, and I think we'd like to continue to support you. So very symbolically, I'm going to ask for a recorded vote on this plan, because what I think that means is that we stand behind the plan, and we would like to see it done. And with that, we'll hope that the mayor and the budget committee will have the wisdom to bring adequate funding to your office to do the work that you intend to do, because it's so important. Thank you once again. So on the item, I will do a recorded vote. All those in favor? Councillor Crisanti is in favor, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Myers, and Councillor Holiday. That is unanimous. Thank you. All right, we'll go back to the item list, and we will go to item AU 7.2. That is the audit of software acquisition and license management, managing and optimizing value from software licenses. Madam Auditor General, you have a presentation for us, so we'll allow a moment to turn over who's at the front, and I'll ask you to begin as soon as you're ready.
Okay, we're ready to get started. So thank you, Chair. Today we have a presentation on our audit of software acquisition and license management, managing and optimizing value from software licenses. I'd like to acknowledge and thank my team on this audit, Syed Ali, Assistant Auditor General, and Gawa Mark, Audit Director, who will be helping me to present today, Susanna Chan, Acting Senior Audit Manager, Andrew Krupovich, Senior Audit Manager, Lexi Wu, Auditor, and Nizam Chowdhury, Acting Auditor. I'd also like to thank City Management and staff for their cooperation and assistance during this audit. There were many from several divisions, including from Technology Services, Sonia Brar, Horace Matthews, Rebecca Wilkins, Edris Mirzadeh, Hamali Vijay and Mala Gautam. From the CISO's office, Manish Agnihotri, Andre Noel. From the City Manager's Office, Kate Basil. From People and Equity, Mary Madigan Lee. From Legal Services, Wendy Wahlberg. And from Finance and Treasury Services, David McIsaac and Genevieve Sharkey. And if I've forgotten anyone, my apologies, but thank you to all of you. Appreciate it. Next slide. So during this presentation, we'll cover why this audit matters, our audit objectives, and walk you through our key audit findings and recommendations. And I'll close with my remarks on going forward. Software licenses are a significant and growing cost as the city embraces digital infrastructure and automates its systems and processes. Over the last 5 years, from 2019 to 2023, the city's total expenditures for software acquisition, maintenance, and support were approximately $235 million, with $78 million spent in 2023. The city currently uses over 7,500 software titles, and over 1,200 titles are paid software. It is important to maximize the value of the city's investment in software and ensure that acquired software licenses and subscriptions are carefully planned, managed, and deployed in a timely manner. Next slide. This audit focused on assessing whether tracking of software licenses, cloud subscriptions, and maintenance is accurate, and that unused software is identified and addressed in a timely manner. The audit scope included 7 selected software applications that are used across the city. Next slide. We'll now walk through our key audit findings and recommendations by these 4 themes we've identified. 1, improve software license acquisition, management, and utilization. 2, terminate licenses of former employees in a timely manner. 3, strengthen IT asset management governance. And 4, explore potential cost-saving opportunities. It's important to note that these issues are not new. My office has completed previous audits of this subject, and there are 12 recommendations that are still in progress from my previous audit reports, many over 5 years old. Next slide, please. So we estimated that the cost associated with unused licenses for 5 of the software applications was almost $11 million, with $1.36 million spent on licenses held by former staff or inactive employees of the city. This cost is related to unused or underutilized software licenses and subscriptions for various periods of time, primarily from 2020 to 2024. For 3 major software products, M365, SAP S4HANA, and ForgeRock used for PDA, the licenses were purchased in bulk to secure upfront discounts offered by the vendors. The unused licenses were mainly due to delayed project implementations. We note that the project delays were due in part to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as other factors such as a lack of readiness of supporting infrastructure and complexity in integrating with other applications. The city must improve project planning and stakeholder coordination to ensure timely deployment of licenses when making bulk purchases, and where possible, to also build flexibility into its contracts on license volumes. I'll now pass it over to Syed Ali, Assistant Auditor General, to go through more of our key findings and recommendations.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Madam Auditor General. So, the single largest portion of the unused licenses in terms of total cost was the bulk purchase of Microsoft M365 subscriptions. The city purchased licenses for an initial 10. Is it good? Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Madam Auditor General. The single largest portion of the unused licenses in terms of total cost was for the bulk purchase of M365 subscriptions. The city purchased licenses for an initial 10,000 users in June 2021, despite known technical issues during the pilot assessment. Management advised that they were not able to fully deploy the licenses ordered in a timely manner due to the constraints of the network architecture. Other challenges cited by management included the reprioritizing of the M365 rollout during the COVID-19 pandemic and high staff turnover in 2022, which affected technology services division staffing levels. As of March 2023, the end of the second year, these 10,000 users had been fully assigned M365 licenses. The cost of the unused licenses during the initial rollout period of 18 months was 6.9 million. According to management, the city will have saved approximately 2.8 million by the end of the contract term in May 2026 from the discounted pricing obtained. However, the savings will be eroded by the costs we identified for unused licenses. Next slide, please. The other two software applications with large costs from unused licenses were SAP S/4HANA and ForgeRock licenses for public digital access PDA solution. As part of the city's financial system and transformation program, the SAP S/4HANA, a cloud-based platform, is being implemented to address the city's current and future business needs. Due to the project implementation delays that was caused by various reasons such as complexity in integrating other applications, the revised go-live date was rescheduled from June 2024 to October 2025. The cost of the unused SAP license subscriptions and services due to the 16-month delay was $1.9 million. Management did attempt to work with the vendor to delay the scheduled purchase of the additional 865 licenses as the go-live date had shifted. However, flexibility had not been built into the contract. Management advised that there were upfront savings of 4.4 million, which involved a freeze in annual price increases for the duration of the contract. However, these savings would be significantly reduced due to the unused licenses we identified. The Public Digital Access PDA solution is a centralized login platform for public-facing city websites, applications, and digital services for the ForgeRock licenses being used for the PDA solution. These unused licenses accounted for approximately $657,000 in cost as of September 2024. In this case, there could have been better timing of the purchase of licenses. An additional 700,000 licenses were purchased during the proof of concept instead of after to secure the volume discount. There were implementation delays on this project due to usability and accessibility issues. We also found there was a lack of communication with the involvement of other divisional stakeholders in planning and mapping out integration with other applications. Management advised that as of September 25, 2024, 15,331 licenses out of 800,000 were in use. Next slide, please. In our report, our recommendations include the following for city to improve its software acquisition, management, and utilization. 1, improve project planning and coordination. Evaluate whether existing unused licenses can be reduced or deferred where projects are delayed, and improve reporting on cost of licenses associated with delayed projects. I will now hand it over to Gawa Mark to take over the rest of the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Syed. When an employee is no longer with the city or goes on long-term leave, it is important to terminate or reassign software licenses in a timely manner to avoid potential unnecessary costs. It's also an important part of the controls for onboarding of staff. The city's data retention policy requires that all email accounts assigned to city staff be retained for a specific period. This was cited as the reason to keep M365 licenses active for former employees' email accounts. However, significantly lower cost options are available. The related cost for 1,554 employees is just over $1 million if these licenses are not reassigned until December 31st, 2024. After we communicated our audit findings, management advised that a new monthly reconciliation process was recently initiated to deactivate M365 licenses assigned to former employees. In addition, we found that there were 526 former employees or employees on long-term leave with SAP licenses that were not deactivated, costing $296,000. We found similar issues for other common applications. When access to software and related licenses is not deactivated in a timely manner, it presents risks, including financial and cybersecurity. An improved process is needed for terminating and reassigning software licenses belonging to former employees. We've recommended that the city terminate or reassign licenses when no longer required, and automate and streamline the offboarding process to reduce the risk of licenses remaining assigned to users who leave the city or are on long-term leave. The city still lacks accurate and reliable information on software inventory and its assignment. Despite the implementation of 2 enterprise information technology asset management systems since 2006, a clear data strategy and plan is needed to manage the city's software assets. The guidelines for overseeing and monitoring IT assets need to be updated and clarified. We've recommended that the city develop criteria and a data strategy to identify software titles that should be managed through the new ITAM system and update the policies, guidelines, and procedures on IT asset management. The city, by virtue of its size, has an opportunity to achieve greater economies of scale through more effective bulk purchasing of software. If agencies and corporations are included in the procurement, the city has several mechanisms in place that can be leveraged to take advantage of the economies of scale that exist in the form of the Toronto Public Services workforce, which consists of over 75,000 employees, including those at the city itself, as well as organizations such as Toronto Transit Commission, Toronto Community Housing Corporation, Toronto Police Service, and Toronto Hydro, among others. These mechanisms include a piggyback clause in the city's procurement bylaw, which enables public bodies to share in the best negotiated pricing available, as well as a cooperative purchasing group, which must meet regularly to share information on procurement activities. The city is already leveraging the province of Ontario's volume licensing agreement. We've recommended that the city explore joint purchasing and leverage economies of scale to achieve volume discounts with other city agencies and corporations. Now back to Madam Auditor General for her closing remarks.
Thank you, Gawa. We provided 10 recommendations in our report, and management has agreed with them. Implementing these recommendations will help the city maximize the value of its investments in software and licenses by eliminating or reducing fees for unused software, providing more accurate and reliable IT asset management data, improving governance and reporting on technology projects, and strengthening strategic direction on implementing new software solutions. These recommendations should be considered not only for the 7 selected software we tested, but also for other software and applications used across the city. We've also noted that there are previous Auditor General reports on this subject, and the 12 recommendations from those reports should also be prioritized and implemented. And finally, I think it's important to note that 2 of the common themes we found recently in our audit reports, including this one, relate to the need to further strengthen IT governance and reporting and IT project management. I understand that management is working on addressing the related recommendations in that area from our EWMS audit report and our audit report on the Pay It Unsolicited proposal. Implementing these recommendations will not only help in terms of IT project management and hopefully minimizing project delays, but will also improve the cross-divisional coordination on major IT projects, as well as the transparency, accountability, and reporting to City Council. Next slide. So thank you for your time and attention today. I'll now turn it back to the chair, and we welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. Are there questions on this item? Okay, Councillor Fletcher and then Councillor Nunziata, thank you.
I'll probably need more than one round.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just interested in, sorry, my mic, I'll pull it down, thank you. I'm interested in what the industry standard is in terms of buying software and then not having it used. So when we're on slide 1, bulk purchase of Microsoft 365 subscriptions, what percentage of the total is the 6.8 million? How many employees are we dealing with? And what is kind of a typical industry standard for buying software and finding that it's not being used? And I'll ask you, and I also don't know if I can ask staff on this as well, Mr. Chair. Can I do that? Oh, you're so great. Thank you.
Yeah, Sonia's here. So perhaps I'll just start off through the chair, and then Sonia, if you want to take it over from there. So through the chair, my understanding is that it is, industry practice to do the bulk purchases. And just to clarify that we are not saying not to do bulk purchases, just pointing out that when they are done, that if there's a way to build flexibility into the contracts in terms of the timing of the license volume, that would help. And also that the cause of a lot of these were due to project delays. So looking at ways to keep projects on time is another one of our recommendations. Syed, anything to add on that before it goes over to Sonia?
Yeah, that's fine. That's it is the industry standard where companies do make bulk purchases, but the issue here is they need to be timely deployed.
No, I understand that, but I'm really looking for numbers. I'm looking for that number of the total purchase, 6.8. I'm looking for the total number of employees that was purchased for, and I'm looking for the industry standard in just buying a lot, because I'm sure we're not the only one that's bulk buying. What's the industry standard in having these left over?
So through the chair, it was for the Microsoft M365, it was 6.9 million out of the total of the cost of unused subscriptions we identified for the 5 software applications of the 9.6, and it was for 10,000 users. Yeah.
I'm just, sorry,
Okay,
my
Sonia, if
question
you'd
is
like
the
to add
total
to that.
amount of the purchase, and now we have 6.896, 6.9, that was basically lost. So
I can,
Yes,
through
yeah.
the chair, I can help support the question. So on M365, we have about 25,000, 26,000 users. So the 10,000 licenses represents roughly just over a third. And the reason why the 10,000 licenses was purchased upfront is because there were significant savings in doing that bulk upfront. But I recognize at the time, the management team only did about a third versus doing the total to mitigate risk. The total purchase for Microsoft licenses is around 17 or 18 million. So this represents about 7 of that.
So 17 million was the total purchase, and 6.8 was left on the table, let's call it that. So that's a fairly high percentage then.
Through the
Yes?
chair, yes, it is a fairly high percentage, but so M365 suffered from unforeseen circumstances, right, because of the pandemic. Otherwise, it was delivered within the timeframe that was considered at the time. It's just a delay of 18 months.
But, okay, what's the industry standard for a $17 million buy during this period?
This would not meet industry standard in terms of leaving software licenses on the table. The other licenses were somewhat delayed as well, but we still see savings during the contract length. This is the only one where we're not getting the savings.
So it's still unclear, what would the industry standard be for this? What is an industry standard for left on the table versus used in general? Does anybody know?
Through the chair, maybe I can try to answer that. On programs, like large program delivery, often you might see a 20% delay on schedule. This would exceed that. And I'm overgeneralizing.
Yep.
Yeah.
20% delay, that could be generally the industry standard in
Sure.
IT. So this was 6.8 over 17. What is that? It's
40%.
Last question for now.
It's roughly 40%.
okay. That's my last question for now. I have more. Thank
For
you.
now. Councillor Nunziata, you
Favorite
had
subject.
questions?
On page 5, if you can just explain it, terminate licenses of former employees in a timely manner. So you indicate 1,554 former employees had the license, and so what is the timely manner? Like when an employee leaves, when does that the license get terminated? Like, what is a timely manner?
So through the chair, I would expect that immediately when they're terminated or leave. that
Exactly,
they're-
that's what I would expect. So these ones here, they were never done? The 1554 for former employees, were they never done? Were they
Yes,
never
yeah,
terminated?
like, there were certain, there were certain issues with the coordination, and some of the, yes, those licenses were not deactivated after the employee left. They were never done.
But they're done now?
They're done now, yes.
Oh, so how long did that take?
Yeah, basically after we pointed out, then they did manual reconciliation, and then it was done in a fairly short amount of time. But during the audit, we found that a number of employees have not, their licenses were not deactivated at all.
So if you didn't do the audit, it would have never been done then?
Could be in certain
I mean-
situations, yes.
So nobody would have picked it up if you didn't do the
In
audit?
certain
That
situations,
you had all
yes.
these former employees?
Yes, in certain situations, yes. Through you, Chair.
Oh, that's very disturbing. So in recommendation 1 in the report, you recommend that software licenses identified in this report can be reduced or deferred to future periods. So would that be possible in your opinion?
So through the chair, so the recommendation says to do this in consultation with the chief procurement officer and the city solicitor. So that's for consideration to determine whether it would be possible or not. But as I mentioned, if there can be greater flexibility built into the contracts in terms of potential delays, to be able to reduce any potential costs from unused licenses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Mr. Chair, I've got questions.
Councillor Crisanti, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, this highlights the importance of the AG's office and the value they bring to the table. Quite concerning about a couple of things, a number of things that we heard here. Could I ask that we go back to the slide that speaks to the 15,000 out of 800,000 in use? If we could, just or could you speak to that and clarify exactly what this statement indicates? Because what I'm hearing is we have
Through you, Mr.
800,000.
Chair. Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So basically, as of September 25th, the management had started implementing certain applications after certain issues like AODA issues were resolved. So in total, city has acquired 800,000 licenses, and 15,000 were implemented at that time when we were about to finish our field work.
At that time, and how long did it take to, are they all activated now? Are the 800,000 licenses all activated?
Now, management would tell you the most recent figure, but the last that we know of is 22,000 out of 800,000 licenses have been implemented.
Can we get a refund on licenses that are not activated or are not going to be used?
I think we'll let management.
Yeah, through the chair. So this particular license deal, we did get quite significant savings. So I want to call that out versus rolling each license out as we onboard users. And those savings outweigh the costs that we're seeing in this report. The current plan to roll out the remaining 800,000 is over the course of 2025.
Okay. No, it's great that, we buy them in bulk, and we, as a result, we have savings. But I don't see where we're saving money here when I see that we're losing money. Could I also ask, on the financial implication part of the report that speaks to a potential, what I'm seeing in my potential $11 million resulting from unassigned and unused licenses. is this number correct? These are licenses that are just unused or unassigned. So potentially we're losing 11 million, or was it 6.9 million?
So through the chair, it is almost $11 million in total for those software that we tested as part of this audit.
Wow, that'll more than cover your budget ask for 2025. So how do we put the brakes on this? Anyway, look, this is just mind-boggling, and it's just frustrating that it seems that it's not being managed through the process. When I heard the comment earlier that industry standard, well, I don't think it's an industry standard to lose money. We are in the private sector. I don't see this happening in the private sector, at least not to this degree. So you're in the process. These recommendations are all good recommendations. Are there timelines on these recommendations? You've got 10 of them. Where does it speak to the implementation timelines in your?
So before we go to that question, I think the Chief Technology Officer, did you want to answer part of Councillor Crisanti's question up front? And then we'll go to the timelines.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I think the best way to look at these licenses is that if we were to have deployed them as per government pricing, we often leverage the VOR, we often leverage other government pricing, we would have spent more on these licenses. So what typically happens in the software industry is that we will, in an effort to drive more value for the city, is do upfront bulk deals. So we'll buy a certain number of licenses upfront, we'll pay for them upfront. We outweigh the risks of that delay, so the 20% that I referenced, to make sure that it is a good deal. So what I can say is, in reference to this report in aggregate, we are still delivering more savings to the city by doing these upfront deals relative to the alternative, which is we pay per use as we roll out the software licenses. So we can go in camera if you want the specifics per license deal. I can certainly give you the numbers.
Yeah, it'd be good to get that analysis on a pay per use versus the bulk buying when we're using a whole bunch of these licenses. And I don't know that we need to go on camera now. I may maybe request a offline meeting in my office to discuss this in more detail prior to council.
Okay.
So my next question was.
So yeah, you had one standing question, and that was just on the timing of the recommendations, and I'll make that the last question, and we can go back around for more.
Yeah. So through the chair, the management response at the end of the report provides management's actions and the timelines to implement our recommendations.
Thank you. Are there further questions? And we'll go back around for a second round, no problem. I'll just check with other members. Okay, I'm gonna ask a couple quickly. My question is to the Chief People Officer. In several points in today's agenda, or at least a couple I can think of, there's reference to offboarding or closeout procedures when employees leave. And I realize there's not always an easy fixed point in time, but can you tell the committee what progress is being made to tighten up the offboarding of an employee? So whether it's their keys to their office, their pass, software licenses, information, whatever it is that gets left behind, how is the city's management team at various levels looking after that process?
Through the chair, thanks for the question. So there's two ways that an employee can leave the organization: voluntarily or involuntary. It's about a 50-50 split. Our turnover is about 9 and change percentage. Involuntary tends to happen very quickly and at point. Systems are closed down because of risk or supposed risk. what the staff have been doing is going back out to re-educate managers, because the point of offboarding begins with the manager themselves to come into the system. What can be difficult is a manager may not know every system that you're on. So Mary may have a whole list of systems she's on, but Paul would not know that. So what we're trying to do is run reports on a very regular basis that get fed into technology services, so they are manually taken off those systems right away. What does happen, though, is immediacy around the actual network is dealt with first, so that you actually shut off access to the network, and then the subsequent systems that will come down after that. It is a work in progress, I will say, Chair, that we are trying to get better at this and mitigate risk as much as possible. It does come down to education, most part, with management.
So the part of the point I would put to you in this report, I'm highly paraphrasing it, is that money and assets are underutilized because there isn't a quick enough process or enough diligence on that offboarding. So while the account may be disconnected, the password frozen, the software license doesn't get redeployed. Or, you know, in a physical sense, the person's laptop is sitting in a drawer, not being redeployed. So can you tell the committee, or can you assure the committee that we're heading to a better place with respect to that? Because that's at the heart of this audit, right, is to become better. And I wasn't clear from the recommendations where we're going. And maybe I'll just round out the question to say that the same thing came up, a similar thing came up in the KPMG management letter that we processed elsewhere. It was just one of the points they raised was about the offboarding of employees. So is there anything you need from the committee to help you? Because I realize this is a really big undertaking because there's a lot of managers out there.
Thank you for the question, Chair. I don't think we need help at this point. What we need is focus. And you can imagine, you know, with 44 divisions and 42,000 people, there's an awful lot of turnover and an awful lot of systems that people are on. Between the Chief Technology Officer and ourselves, we are trying to make sure that we have proper reporting going in on systems on a very, very regular basis that are more expediently turned off. Therefore, the license is turned off. Therefore, it can be done, it can be used in which way is possible. I don't think in the report, from the report, we do realize that we weren't moving quite as fast enough as we could, but it's not a blame on who does what, or it's just really about education, helping managers to understand their role, understanding our role, and how do we share and communicate in a more expedient manner such that people are not lingering on systems they're not active on.
Thank you. Second round, Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, what information?
And for you, Councillor Crisanti,
Your voice
for sure.
has really gotten deep, Paula. Okay, go.
Oh, Councillor Fletcher says, go ahead, Councillor Crisanti. Go right ahead.
Well, Councillor, you're very kind, but you should go first. You spoke first. All right. So I understand that, and so previously there were a number of recommendations in a previous report. Can you just speak to that for a moment, and how many recommendations were there in a previous report?
So through the chair, there are 12 recommendations that are currently outstanding still, and many of them are over 5 years old, and they are listed at the end of our report.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so again, so in total, between the 12 from previously that are now 5 years old, and 10 that we have now, so it's going to be a total of 22 recommendations. Out of the 12 that we have that were there since 2019 that are 5 years old, how many are have any been implemented?
So through the chair, the 12 are the ones that remain outstanding. There were other recommendations that were previously implemented. Is that your question? Sorry, it's hard to hear.
Yeah, so they're all outstanding then?
Yes,
all
so
12.
22 in total now, between this report and the previous ones related to software licenses.
Yeah, So these 10 recommendations and the timelines you spoke to are mostly coming back in the Q2 of 25 and Q2, 2025. You're looking for recommendations to be implemented by 2025?
Through the chair, I'm not sure where you got that date from. So the dates are in management's response at the end of the report. I'll turn it over to management to clarify
Can you reiterate those dates, please? Yeah. I just want to make sure we got dates that everyone feels comfortable with, since we don't have the initial 12 recommendations addressed.
Through the chair, so I will say that the team's done a great job of addressing previous recommendations. We've got a number of outstanding, and our closure rate is now up to 62%. We've doubled it over the last 3-4 years. So there is an intense focus on closing outstanding recommendations. For the 12 that are previously outstanding, we have a plan to close over the course of 2025, 2026. Some of those ones that are in 2026 are related to capital projects that we're working on to implement. And then for the new ones, 8 out of the 10 will be closed over the course of 2025. There are 2 that are related to a capital project that will extend into 2026. But I will reassure the committee that we are very focused on closing these out.
So could I just ask you, if we are focused, and we should be, on closing these out, would you feel comfortable maybe tightening these timelines given the nature of the issue and how we've have so many licenses that are not assigned, or we've lost some money here already, and if we tighten this, maybe we could save some money?
Yeah.
Are you comfortable tightening these?
Through the chair, there are a number of recommendations where I know the AG also mentioned they were already underway because of previous audits. And so
right.
those are already underway. They're largely around governance and related to the EWMS audit and the paid audit. So those are well underway. And then what I would say is that there are a number that are current practice. What we're doing is just tightening up the current practice. So I do want to assure you that the timelines are aggressive, and we have a good practice in place to make sure that we're not underutilizing software moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fletcher.
Just going back to the savings versus cost for the bulk purchase. So as I understand it, that M365 is a $17 million bulk purchase, right? Correct?
Through the chair, correct.
Correct. And so what was your anticipated savings? What would that have been if you hadn't had a bulk purchase?
Through the chair, I'd have to answer that in camera.
Oh, okay. I'm happy to have you tell me, not in camera, but just tell me. Whisper it. So we don't know what the estimating savings were supposed to be versus what the actual shortfall was here. And you can't tell me that directly, but you could tell me that later. Okay. Then the other thing is, just back to the industry standard, and I hate to disagree with my colleague, but we don't know what happens in private companies. It could be 40, it could be 50, it could be anything, because there's no reporting out. Is that right?
Through the chair, that's correct. My response was just based on experience.
So if we were to look at, are there other public entities that report out in this way versus on their purchases, or any of the city's ABCs or any other public entities that you could make a comparison with? For the 40%?
Through the chair, not that I'm aware.
Okay. Then the other one is the 26,000 users, that's for M365. Is that just most, who does that cover? Who are those users?
Through the chair, that covers management as well as the EOs and AOs.
I'm sorry, can't hear it. Who?
It covers management as well as the accountability officers and counselors.
So all management, all accountability officers and counselors end up with, so that's an interesting one. That somehow, okay, that implementation was very slow then. And it was 40%. I'm just interested on the oversight of this and what the role of internal audit is on some of these, because we are finding regularly some of these digital practices, digital purchases. I'm going to go back to pay it. Some of those things have become a problem because you're not buying something that you can actually see. What is the internal oversight and reporting out? Does it go through GGM, or is that non-existent at the moment?
So through the chair, before passing it over to internal audit, we do have a recommendation here in terms of improving the reporting. Previously, there was a modernization committee which dissolved, and so a previous recommendation that had been implemented, that practice stopped when that committee dissolved. So that is why we've included a new recommendation around that.
I'm just interested in why internal audit hasn't been overseeing this regularly, because IT is this kind of thing is fairly new. We're always running into issues with IT and purchases. So what is the role of internal audit here, and what should they have been doing, and why weren't they on this before the auditor got to it?
I'll turn that over to Stuart Campbell.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll basically say, given the resources available, we continue to try to focus our attention on the greatest need, where we believe the greatest risks are, Councillor. That being said, I can share with you, this is more future-looking, is I acknowledge and recognize that one of the significant risks that we should always focus our attention on is around information technology, which is why literally as we speak, through the support of the city manager and the chief financial officer, we are building a stronger information technology audit presence in the city of Toronto. And as a matter of fact, there is recruitment underway where I'm hiring a specific manager that's going to specifically focus on, and they're being called an information technology audit manager, to, among other things, both work on an advisory basis and an assurance basis to address some of these matters and issues around information technology.
So you would know that in all the ABCs, that's the board's function, to oversee IT and make sure it's operating properly, correct? Let's say TTC, that's vested in the board of directors, correct? Pardon? You know, because maybe that's at council, to be a little clearer. Okay, we'll do that there, because it is a function that's quite clear, and the auditor is now going to oversee, let us know how different ABCs are doing in that nature, Mr. Chair. I just have one other, and that's got to do with cities and agencies and corporations have over 75,000 employees who may be using common software applications. What software is that?
Through the chair, Microsoft, Adobe, and SAP.
Are you talking about M365? Because
Yeah,
only
M365.
managers have that. Are you saying there's 50,000 managers and there's no counselors except for here, but who has M365 is 26,000 people, which are managers, and the other one was counselors and one other, accountability officers. And then are you saying there's 50,000 managers out there in all the ABCs that would be able to take advantage of bulking, or doing bulk bundling purchases?
Chair, I do want to clarify the 26,000 also includes some unionized staff that.
Many?
I'd have to get you the number exactly.
Why don't we make sure you have that for council and you
Sure.
can put that in the report?
Sounds
So
good.
how many unionized staff are there? Part-time, full-time, all those kinds of things. So when you're looking at 75,000 employees, who are they? And what would those be? And what would the savings be if it was bundled?
Yeah, so through the chair, the 75,000 are all staff across the city. But we
Sorry.
can get more information for you.
All
before council.
staff across the city, all ABCs, all staff?
Including ANCs, yes, including agencies and corporations. So the point there was just to show that there's the potential in terms of, including the agencies and corporations together with the city with exploring cost-saving opportunities in the
So
procurement.
what would the cost savings be to add 50,000 people to our bundling?
Yeah, so through the chair, it depends on the contract and the negotiation, so can't really speak to that.
Okay, and I'm just asking, does internal audit report on this to government, general government? Because it is a function, or Budget Committee, or where would they report on this kind of thing?
So speaking as being on the committee, I think the reports come from time to time for the purchases. But I think the reports on the purchases are generated by management. And I'm going to ask a question about that in a second.
Great, I'll let you ask it.
Was that all the questions, Councillor Fletcher?
Yes, thank you. I'll expect some more information based on what we talked about.
And so, Councillor Fletcher, you did allude to more information. Did you need time to put a motion together for a supplemental report, or did you want to seek that on your own?
I think everybody knows.
Okay. My question to management is, can you give the committee an overview of the governance? Councillor Fletcher did point out that in some of the agencies, the boards have a role, but I recall from government management committee work that there is some internal structure for governing projects. And if I can just expand my question a little bit more, I'm going to, again, paraphrase Madam Auditor General's detailed work, but part of the finding here is that decisions are made throughout the life of a project. And one of the decisions that was taken in some of these projects was to do a bulk purchase. But the project perhaps didn't unfold the way that it was intended to, or at least the timing wasn't the same. And so there is some criticisms there about synchronizing the timing of the bulk purchase and so on. But how does the management team oversee this? I call that management team, but I know there's structures. And that's the same team that brings the purchase requisitions or the contract extensions to the Government Management Committee from time to time. So can you true up all of those pieces in maybe a very simple overview of how governance for IT works for this committee so that we can better understand that process and if we need to think about that?
Through the chair, I can take that question. So there's kind of three tactics we've got. So one is we do have a strategic roundtable with the CIOs of the agencies and corporations. We meet on a quarterly basis. That's been in place for at least the last 18 months, where we do review our larger programs. So M365 has gone through a review, SAP has gone through a review, and anything new that we're initiating. The intent of that is to make sure that we're collaborating on some of our larger deals and larger programs so that we can look to the agencies and corporations for anything we might want to do in joint partnership. And that's been quite fruitful over the last 18 months. The second piece is any of the recommendations that come to us around strengthening governance, so EWMS audit, the paid audit, any other audits, we do work with the agencies and corporations to make sure that the similar governance structure is put in place across the ABCs. So EWMS, for example, we've shared our learnings and continue to share how we're structuring. And the last thing I'll say around contracts is that we do always have a piggyback clause on our contracts. So the timing may not work out for the agencies and corporations to jump onto our contract negotiations, but they have the benefit of leveraging our pricing on anything that we negotiate. And in turn, we also do that with the Ontario government contracts as well.
Maybe one final articulation. Divisions within the city, pick any division, can serve a function as a client. So they articulate their needs, they pay the bill, but there's also a centralized IT function which handles enhanced oversight. And the centralized function ties the strings together with an enterprise view. Could you articulate for the committee a little bit more about how that mechanism works? Sometimes it feels like everyone's off going, doing their own thing, but I'm not sure that that's entirely true. Could you offer this committee a little bit of an insight to the workings within the government's IT centralized structure?
Through the chair, I can give you a very good example. So the Adobe contract is one where the divisions decide how many licenses they need, but we do have a centralized structure and a centralized contract with Adobe that we've negotiated for bulk pricing. And so the issuing of those licenses comes through my team so that we can manage the volumes and we can manage the pricing of that, even though the divisions are paying for that pay-per-use license.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Fletcher, third round.
Yes, because you raised it, and now I have to clarify it. Thank you. Sorry about that, everybody. you've indicated that you meet with the ABCs and do certain things. How are the boards of directors, boards of management of all the ABCs advised of this activity? Because I'm not sure they are, yet it's their responsibility, oversight, and accountability for IT, each board. So how would you advise, what's your operational approach there? Letter?
Through the chair, I can't speak to how they're notified. I do know in some cases, the CIOs do report into the boards. For example, TTC, so Colin Stairs would bring it to, in that example, bring it to the board. I'm not clear on the structure for all the ABCs, though.
So that would be to the Auditor General, that, what is that structure? Because the accountability for IT is at the board level, and we can see it's kind of a new frontier. So if the city is meeting and the lead, then how would the boards understand that? Is there a suggestion that you would make out of this kind of report or separate? And the other thing I'm going to ask, Mr. Chair, is maybe not today, but I think it's important on the IT front that our Auditor General advise that who has the best practice for IT, reporting, purchasing, everything of all of the city and all the ABCs, because there is a best practice out there. Perhaps on this one, we didn't meet it. I'm not sure what, I'm not saying the city's always got the best practice, but apparently people are meeting together. So who determines who's got best practice at this point? I think I'll ask the CFO, who would determine what the best, what's your advice for the city, our city council, to get advice on who has the best practice, how everybody can learn from that, because every single ABC in the city has their own strategy around IT, accountability, and everything else.
Through the chair, I do think there are steps being taken in terms of a community of practice across the different agencies. There are opportunities either through the AG's office that does have an ability to go in through their internal, or we could even engage a third party in terms of taking on that review.
So everybody has their IT report. We're going to hear one today from seniors and TCH. We're going to hear exactly where that's at, particularly cybersecurity. So I'm interested in how whoever does it the best is able to help everybody else. And I hear that we don't quite have that set up. And who would oversee that? But that's a good question. I know the chair agrees with me.
Through the chair, I will say, I think in certain areas, and you know, we can speak to cyber in one case where there is, I don't want to speak on behalf of our cyber team, but there are actions that are being taken that are then rolled out across all of our agencies to ensure compliance. And you know,
I guess I'm not saying that. I'm saying to ensure compliance, but some of the agencies may be ahead of the city. And that's assuming that the city's always got the best practice. And I'm not going to assume that. I'm going to assume that every single agency is now involved in best practice. Who would oversee who's got the best practice? Chair, I'm just going to leave that with you because it's kind of an important area that you and I have agree 100% on.
I think these are very good governance questions, Councillor Fletcher.
Always agree 100%. I think everybody knows that.
Any other questions before we go to speakers? Seeing none, to speak on this matter. Councillor Crisanti, did you want to speak on the item?
Well, actually, I wasn't going to, but, you know, again, I want to just thank the Auditor General just very quickly for bringing this to our attention. And again, this again highlights and underscores the critical importance ensuring that timelines are tight for recommendations, ensuring that recommendations are followed. And so we got our work cut out for us here. You know, we got 22 recommendations in this case. Sounds like, from what I hear from staff, that some of these recommendations are already underway. But nonetheless, we're way behind the 8 ball, and this taxpayer dollars are being thrown out the window here, and that really should make us all quite angry. And And so let's get it back on track. And I look forward to seeing actual savings coming out of this, starting like yesterday as quickly as possible. And I will be speaking with staff offline as well prior to council. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Crisante. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, on the item, all those in favor? Any opposed? That item carries. Okay, on to the next item that was held by Councillor Fletcher, AU 7.3, Cybersecurity Audit of Toronto Community Housing and Toronto Seniors Housing Corporations, Phase 2, User Access Management and Event Logging. This item does have a confidential attachment, so if we do go into line of questioning, we will move in camera appropriately, but at this juncture, it is questions of staff in public session.
Yes,
Councillor Fletcher.
who am I asking?
We're just going to check to see who's online.
Oh, it just should be up there. Well, first off, the auditor. This has come up a few times, has it not? The cyber issues. How many times has this been? Because I haven't been on this committee all that long.
So through the chair, this is the second phase of our cybersecurity audit.
Second phase, and thank you. And the first phase found what?
Through the chair, I would need to go in camera to be able, and this report is on phase 2.
Do we need to go on camera on this report?
This is also part of the cybersecurity audit, so if there's any detailed questions on the content, we would need to go in camera.
So why don't we finish Chair, the agenda and then go in camera on the cybersecurity?
Okay, so I'll just check, are there any other public questions on this item? If not, we'll hold it down, we'll go into camera. Thank you. So we're going to move on to the next item as soon as I can change my computer screen. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's number 6. AU 7.6 is the status update on enterprise risk management. Councillor Myers, you had held this item. Questions of staff.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So I guess my first question is just, could you just help me understand who will be using the ERM to make decisions?
Through the chair, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good, okay, very good. If I understand who will be using ERM to make decisions, as far as I'm concerned, I think it's any manager that needs to make business decisions. As far as I'm concerned, information coming out of a risk managed ERM process is just another form of information that managers need to make good decisions, whether it be financial information, people information, and risk information. So as far as I'm concerned, I think any manager or decision maker will use information coming out of an ERM process.
Okay, thank you. So I guess my question, and this might be a bit related, did you see the communications that was posted to this item?
The letter? Yes, I did see it.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I have a similar concern in that often I see city staff take the default approach of trying to eliminate any and all risk and then winding up with the answer of being no. Or overcompensating and trying to eliminate risk. So we've seen this with when we allowed alcohol in the parks and they produced, these gigantic signs, or when there was the move to forbid tobogganing on the snow hills because it could produce an injury, or when, I remember back when city staff tore up a lot of the parks because they were deemed quote unquote unsafe. How does this framework capture those nuances where city staff might just be applying this as a one-size-fits-all, but not actually getting it right, I would say?
May I just intervene just to say, I don't know that staff can speak to the letter, but perhaps staff could speak to the application of the framework at a very operational level, which would include many, many decisions. And I think the spirit of that letter did get into some of the operational level of the application of the framework. But if we could just talk about it, what we have is high level before us. But I think how this plays out to the everyday corners of the city, to the extent we could talk about today, would be helpful.
Okay, I'll make some comments on that. Certainly, it would be remiss to say that I certainly think that a business manager in the city certainly has a pretty good understanding of what operational risks that they face and attempt to make decisions around that. What this ERM is attempting to do is provide a more consistent approach and an integrated approach to enterprise risks. And I do differentiate, Councillor, enterprise risk from operational risk. I should share with you that certainly this framework should not be taking away from any manager their processes they take to manage risks in children's services or tobogganing or whatever the case may be. All we're attempting to do is bring it up to an enterprise level for consistency purposes. But in no way are we going to start dictating, or this framework, excuse me, going to start dictating specifically how a manager both assesses and then manages their risks. But we're trying to bring it up a level. My hope in the longer term is certainly like an ERM profile or a framework that we talked about is bringing good information up to those executive decisions makers where they have a better understanding of those enterprise risks impeding strategic success of the city. I don't know if that's answering your question, Councillor, but
I somewhat, I guess my other question is I'm looking on page 10 out of 14 of the PDF, and I see sort of the risks laid out. And I see that some of these risks seem to, like, for example, reputational risk, negative public perception, media attention, creating a loss of confidence. And just sort of going back to where I was going with the earlier questions, when I see a lot of the risk-taking or risk-making, decision-making happening in the city, it seems to be trying to get it at simply being risk-averse or eliminating risk, which again is not possible. So I guess I'm just trying to understand, how are we training city staff to understand that this is the framework, but there is some inherent risk in their job in when making decisions, particularly when you're trying to be innovative or working with, let's say, less sophisticated partners like small not-for-profits or community groups in terms of, for example, letting them use a community space outside of normal business hours. Because they might need space, we might see that space is available and there might be a need, but often when I have these conversations with city staff, it's no, there's a risk. There's a risk that someone might get hurt. There's a risk that we might get sued. And it just seems always the answer is no.
Mm-hmm. Well, through the chair, I'll comment on that a little further as well. I think maybe the CFO might be commenting as well. But certainly when we talk about risk, we always talk about risk being a negative, but risk can be a positive in terms of an opportunity. Let's not lose track of that. And I think one of the other things we're working on, and I'm working on this through the CFO and others, is sort of promote a risk culture and the fact that, no, you cannot eliminate a risk and will never eliminate a risk. But I think we want to take more, let's call it, well-defined, consistent, structured risk-taking. And those that need to know that the risk we're taking on in a particular decision is known and effectively communicated. So as far as I'm concerned, ERM is on a journey. It's not going to happen overnight, and I think we want to continue to promote a risk culture in the organization.
A risk culture that also, I see on page 3, seizes opportunities.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions on this item? Seeing none, members to speak? Someone like to move the recommendations of the report? Councillor Meyer moves the report. All those in favor? Any opposed? That item carries. There are 2 items, members. One of them is just being held down because of the need to go on camera. So our final item is AU 7.9, Business Improvement Areas. Excuse me, our final item before going in camera. AU 7.9, Business Improvement Areas. update on 2023 audited financial statements. Councillor Fletcher, you held the item for questions. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not sure, sorry? Oh, okay. When it says update, what do you mean by update? Is this just not the 2023 financial statements that have been submitted, or is there something special that's been looked at in these statements?
Thanks for your question. Through the chair, and it's an update on the status of the 2023 audit financial statements. So this is a standard report we bring to committee every year, providing the details of the financial statements.
So these are just the financial statements that are provided at the annual general meeting that were approved by the boards and by the external auditor. There's no audit work that you're doing of any kind here. It's a pass-through, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
So if a councillor wanted to know more about an audited statement, would they be able to get that information from the Auditor General, from the CFO, or would that have to be from the independent auditor? And that you might not be able to answer that question.
Through the chair, I think the question is about the details of financial statements. You have to go to the BIA themselves.
So you have to get that from the BIA, even though they're submitted here, and they now are owned by the city. Is that a proper process that we would have to go to the BIA for that information? I don't have to, pardon?
So Councillor Fletcher, if it helps, just working with the clerk, if there's a particular audit that's of concern,
No, I'm asking in general. I want to understand.
No, but I mean, if you see something in here, we can bring questions of staff, which includes the agency. So we can examine them at this committee. And we can also ask staff about if there's any management letters or items of concern that are flagged to it. It's the governance allows us that chance here. So does that help generally about how to dig into them?
Let's say I have the annual statement from any other Board of Management, correct? That would come to here or where?
That's my understanding, and so we could ask questions of it.
We can ask questions of it, online or offline.
Online?
Or offline.
Or offline.
That's our ability to do that. And who would answer those questions?
The board, I believe. Yep, we can bring the questions here. I believe we can bring them to council as well, because these reports go to council. We can ask staff of each of those agencies, whether it's one of the large agencies that report to the city or a BIA in this case.
So who would that staff be at a BIA?
We have to work with the clerk's office to locate the right staff person or a board member.
Okay. That is, I think we'll take this conversation offline.
Thank you.
And I'd like to know the role of economic development, because they sit in all the meetings, they're there constantly, they're overseeing the spending, and any issues that might be of interest, including governance issues, should not be left with the BIA. Is that not correct, in my opinion? That you don't leave a governance issue with the person that is in charge of the governance. So who oversees the governance then?
That's the city manager's office, and I know
manager?
that we have asked questions of the city manager's office when we came to dealing with arena board filings at the committee as well.
So just to be clear, city manager's office, same with, you got out of that one easy because it's the city manager's office. Again, same with the cyber governance relationship there is with city manager, and then any issues that we have with any BIA reporting or public reporting of anything, that is now a conversation with the city manager's office, online or offline. All we're doing here is saying, we're receiving these, so now the city now has these. And if there's further questions about it, can either be, I'm just clarifying, directly to the BIA, or if there are governance issues around the style of reporting or anything else, to the city manager's office.
I think that's correct, and we also have
clear.
Finance and Treasury as well that can provide advice to us about these items.
Correct. Thank you. That's it. I may have some questions before council. I just want to understand the cascading, because I know that you did that with that was a topic for the arena boards at one point. And I know you're answering all my questions now, which is fine.
That's okay. They're process questions, and hopefully just trying to be helpful.
Thank you. No, very helpful.
Any other questions of staff?
Yeah, just a question then. So when it comes to BIAs, is it not economic development that you get information from? If there's issues with a particular BIA with spending, is it not economic development?
Through the chair, that's correct. So it's economic development that oversees the BIA governance.
Okay.
So they should be able to.
But it
also
wouldn't be the
answer
city
questions.
manager's office.
I'm not sure.
What?
Through the chair, the city manager's office does oversee overall governance across of our boards and our agencies. I think in the case of the report that's in front of us, these are audited statements, which are the purview of the Audit Committee, which is why these are coming to Audit Committee.
So, but any particular issue with a particular BIA, it's economic development.
Through the chair, this might be better suited for clerks. I would imagine it depends on the issue and where it would belong.
Okay.
Clerks?
No, I don't know. I'm a little confused on this one. Okay.
Well, I'm confused. I'm not confused. What if the economic development are not the experts in governance? They don't have the governance relationships. It's the city manager's office. So I don't think is the city manager delegated authority over governance to this economic development?
Speaker, sorry, happy to answer that question, Councillor. So just to clarify, the governance and oversight for agencies and corporations is conducted through the city manager's office. From an operational day-to-day perspective, in the case of the BIAs, their major contact would be through the economic development division. So from a day-to-day management perspective, but from a governance oversight perspective, it is the city managers that has that relationship.
There's your answers, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of staff?
No, we've clarified that. Good. Thank
Seeing
you.
none, anyone to speak on the item? Can someone
No,
move
I'm
them?
fine.
I
Just
can move
accept, I'll move to accept them.
All right, Councillor Fletcher moves. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Okay, thank you. So we are going to go back to AU 7.3, Cybersecurity Audit of Toronto Community Housing and Toronto Seniors Housing Corporations, Phase 2, User Access Management and Event Logging. We are going to go in camera, so we're going to need a motion for that. I'm happy to place that the Audit Committee recess its public session, meet and close session to consider the following. AU 7.3, Cybersecurity Audit of Toronto Community Housing and Toronto Seniors Housing Corporations, Phase 2, User Access Management and Event Logging. Reason for confidentiality involves the security of the property of the City of Toronto or one of its agencies and corporations. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Mr. Clerk, over to you.
Just a short recess while we clear the room.
So we will take a short recess while we clear the room. Thank you. We are now back in public session with a quorum being present. Clerk advises first motion is to extend our meeting past 12:30 lunch to ensure that we complete the agenda, which I think will be very promptly. So I will go back to and just confirm, do we have any questions of staff? Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. We will go back now and resume item number AU 7.3, which is, I'll read the title, Cybersecurity Audit of Toronto Community Housing and Toronto Seniors Housing Corporations, Phase 2, User Access Management and Event Logging. I'll confirm one more time, are there any questions in public? Seeing none, members wishing to speak? Seeing none, would someone like to move the recommendations? Okay, I'll move. Vice Chair Myers moves the recommendations. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Confirming with the clerk, there are no other items of business, and therefore the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.